Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting and useful. Give me more ideas you want me to make. Enjoy watching the video. New York City, a relentless metropolis where ambition fueled every hurried step, where dreams and daunting pressures intertwined into a chaotic symphony. Amidst the towering glass facades and the ceaseless hum of commerce, stood Brightwave Agency, a titan in the advertising world. Their campaigns weren't just memorable, they were cultural phenomena, shaping trends and breathing life into global brands. This was a place where creativity was currency and competition a way of life. Within Brightwave's gleaming, open-plan offices, a particular feud had become legendary. Ethan Cole, 31, was the senior creative lead, a man carved from the very essence of corporate efficiency. His presence was as sharp and unyielding as the creases in his bespoke suits. Ethan was a perfectionist to the bone, a man for whom punctuality was a religion and sloppiness a cardinal sin. His desk, a minimalist shrine to order, reflected his mind, every pen aligned, every document filed. He moved through the office with an air of cool, almost arrogant confidence, his gaze often dismissing anything that didn't align with his meticulous vision. He had a reputation for being brilliant, but equally for being unapproachable, a control freak, as some whispered, a robot as others dared to think. His creative process was a finely tuned machine, driven by logic, market data, and an unwavering commitment to measurable results. On the other side of this unspoken battlefield was Harper Lane, 28, a copywriter whose vibrant spirit often felt out of place in Brightwave's sleek, monochromatic environment. Harper was a whirlwind of artistic energy, a kaleidoscope of ideas that often defied conventional boundaries. Her desk was a testament to her creative chaos. Post-it notes of every color adorned her monitor, sketchbooks spilled open beside half-empty coffee cups, and a menagerie of quirky trinkets jostled for space. Punctuality wasn't her strong suit. Her arrivals were often marked by a hurried dash and a charmingly sheepish grin. Yet, when inspiration struck, her words could weave magic, stirring emotions and painting vivid mental landscapes. She lived by feeling, believed deeply in the power of art, and held an unwavering conviction that everything happens for a reason. Where Ethan saw data, Harper saw stories. Where he saw strategy, she saw soul. Their professional dynamic was less a collaboration and more a constant clash of titans. Ethan saw Harper's ideas as flights of fancy, utterly devoid of logic, beautiful but ultimately impractical and unmarketable. He would dissect her copy with surgical precision, stripping away what he deemed superfluous emotion to reveal the cold, hard facts. Harper, in turn, found Ethan's approach stifling, his critiques soul-crushing, and his demeanor as warm as a spreadsheet. She'd often retort that he was a robot, completely devoid of human emotion, unable to grasp the nuanced beauty of her artistic concepts. Their sparring matches were a source of both entertainment and exasperation for their colleagues, a predictable yet always intense spectacle. The latest catalyst for their ongoing office war came in the form of a prestigious new project, a high-stakes advertising campaign for Luminique, a luxury perfume brand. The product itself was a delicate paradox, requiring a campaign that could evoke profound emotion while simultaneously adhering to a shrewd, strategic market penetration. It was a challenge that demanded both Harper's poetic flair and Ethan's analytical rigor. Their formidable CEO, Arthur Sterling, a man with the strategic mind of a chess grandmaster and the patience of a saint, when it came to office feuds, had made the executive decision to force them into an uneasy alliance. "This project needs both of you," he declared in his booming baritone, his gaze sweeping from a glowering Ethan to a defiant Harper. The raw emotion, Harper, and the precise execution, Ethan. Combine your strengths or find yourselves looking for new strengths elsewhere. Their first official meeting for the Luminique project was a masterclass in passive aggression that rapidly escalated into outright verbal combat. The conference room, usually a sterile environment, crackled with their barely contained animosity. Harper arrived, predictably, 15 minutes late, carrying a stack of art books and a new, brightly patterned scarf. Ethan, already seated, tapped his designer pen impatiently on his perfectly clear notepad, his expression a mask of disapproval. "Glad you could grace us with your presence, Harper," Ethan began, his voice dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm, without even looking up from his notes. "Perhaps we should start a little later next time, to accommodate your artistic schedule." Harper bristled, dropping her books onto the table with a thud. "And perhaps you could loosen up, Ethan. It's an ad campaign, not a heart transplant." The initial brainstorming session quickly devolved. Harper presented a mood board filled with ethereal images, watercolor sketches, and lyrical poetry about the scent evoking forgotten memories and whispered desires. "Luminique isn't just a perfume," she articulated passionately, gesturing grandly. "It's an experience, a journey into one's deepest self. Our campaign needs to capture that intangible magic, that whisper of the soul." Ethan, however, saw only ambiguity. He leaned back, arms crossed, a skeptical arch in his brow. "Magic? Whisper of the soul. Harper, we're selling perfume, not a spiritual awakening. Where's the call to action? Where's the demographic targeting? How does Whisper of the Soul translate into a 15% increase in market share among affluent women aged 30 to 55? He tapped a precise finger on a graph he'd already prepared. "Your concept is beautiful, I'll give you that, but it's unquantifiable. It lacks concrete strategic pillars." Harper's eyes flashed. "It lacks concrete strategic pillars because it's about feeling, Ethan. It's about creating an emotional connection. You can't put a spreadsheet on passion, you control freak." She threw her hands up in exasperation, nearly knocking over a glass of water. "Everything with you has to be so rigid, so predictable. Where's the imagination? Where's the joy?" Ethan's jaw tightened, a vein throbbing slightly in his temple. "Joy doesn't pay the bills, Harper. Results do. And at least I know what I'm doing, what I'm aiming for. Unlike you, who seems content to just float along on a cloud of artistic whimsy." He pushed back his chair, the scraping sound echoing through the tense room. "Your ideas are a liability, Harper. They're all style and no substance. This is a multi-million-dollar campaign, not your personal art project. And your strategy is a black hole of corporate jargon, sucking all the life out of anything genuinely creative." Harper retorted, rising to face him. "You drain the color out of everything. You're so afraid to take a risk, to feel something. Risk needs to be calculated, Harper, not impulsive." Ethan shot back, his voice rising, usually so composed, now edged with frustration. "You talk about feelings, but I'm talking about tangible outcomes for our client. One of us understands how this business actually works." "Oh, I understand it perfectly, Ethan," Harper countered, her voice laced with defiant passion. "I understand that true brilliance often comes from breaking the rules, from daring to be different, something your rulebook probably doesn't cover." The argument raged on for another 10 minutes, punctuated by accusations, eye rolls, and exasperated sighs. It was a spectacular display of professional animosity, witnessed by a handful of stunned junior executives who wisely kept their heads down. Finally, Ethan, with a frustrated huff, grabbed his meticulously organized briefcase and stormed out, leaving Harper fuming in the empty conference room. She slammed her palm on the table, muttering, "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. That man is going to be the death of me." Little did she know, their war was about to take a turn neither of them could have ever predicted, a turn that would force them to confront not just each other's perspectives, but their very identities. Their mutual disdain had reached a fever pitch, creating a palpable tension within the creative department. The Luminique campaign, meant to be a flagship success, was instead becoming a battleground. Their colleagues tiptoed around them, bracing for the next inevitable explosion. Arthur Sterling, observing from his glass-walled office, knew a different approach was needed. He saw the raw talent in both of them, the potential for an explosive synergy if only they could overcome their personal animosity. He believed the perfume campaign, with its duality of emotion and strategy, was the perfect crucible to forge that synergy. But he knew it wouldn't happen in the pressurized environment of the Brightwave office. A change of scenery, he decided, was imperative. a radical, forced collaboration away from the familiar battlegrounds. He made a call to his assistant, initiating a plan that would unknowingly set the stage for an extraordinary, life-altering event. The stage was set not just for a campaign, but for a profound, unexpected transformation that would challenge everything Ethan and Harper thought they knew about themselves and each other. The city hummed on, oblivious to the subtle shift in the universe that was about to unfold for two of its most disparate inhabitants. The aftermath of their explosive meeting left a palpable chill in the Brightwave offices. Colleagues navigated around Ethan and Harper as if they were live wires, bracing themselves for the next inevitable spark. Arthur Sterling, the CEO, a man who believed in tough love and unconventional solutions, watched the unfolding drama with a calculated glint in his eye. He knew the Luminique campaign was too crucial to be derailed by personal animosity, and he saw the untapped potential in forcing these two brilliant, yet stubborn, minds to truly connect. His solution was as unorthodox as it was brilliant: a mandatory creative synergy retreat. Later that afternoon, a sternly worded email landed in both Ethan's and Harper's inboxes, an official decree from the CEO himself. Subject: Mandatory Creative Workshop, Luminique Campaign. The email outlined a weekend-long creative seminar at the Catalyst Grove, a remote, eco-friendly retreat nestled deep in the upstate New York wilderness, promising to reignite creative sparks and foster unprecedented collaboration. Attendance, the email emphasized in bold red letters, was non-negotiable. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. Ethan read it, his lips thinning into a grim line. A weekend away, trapped with Harper in the wilderness? It sounded like his personal hell. He prided himself on his self-discipline and his ability to compartmentalize, to separate work from his meticulously planned life. This retreat threatened to dismantle all of that. He imagined forced group activities, touchy-feely exercises, and, worst of all, an inescapable amount of Harper's chaotic energy. He spent the next hour meticulously planning what he would pack, ensuring he had enough portable chargers, noise-canceling headphones, and an emergency supply of instant coffee to maintain some semblance of his routine. He even packed a small, pocket-sized book on corporate strategy, just in case he needed to ground himself in logic. Harper, on the other hand, groaned dramatically upon reading the email. A retreat? That sounded suspiciously like a euphemism for team-building exercises and forced fun. Her idea of a productive weekend involved gallery hopping, sketching in Central Park, or getting lost in a good novel. Being cooped up with Ethan Cole, away from the vibrant pulse of the city, felt like a cruel cosmic joke. She pictured endless lectures on market analysis and synergy, delivered in Ethan's monotone, analytical voice. Her packing was, predictably, a last-minute scramble of mismatched clothes, an overflowing sketchbook, and a worn copy of her favorite poetry anthology, hoping it might offer a shield against the impending boredom. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear. The company's shuttle bus, usually filled with boisterous chatter, was eerily silent. Ethan sat ramrod straight, staring out the window, occasionally checking his watch. Harper, slumped in the seat behind him, was already halfway through her poetry book, a pair of oversized headphones blasting indie folk music, clearly attempting to create a soundproof bubble around herself. They exchanged not a single word, their silent animosity a heavy cloak in the vehicle. The Catalyst Grove was a collection of rustic chic cabins nestled amidst ancient, towering trees, a stark contrast to the concrete jungle they'd left behind. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The main lodge, a grand timber structure with a massive stone fireplace, was where the workshops would be held. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Willow, the retreat's enigmatic facilitator. Willow was a woman who seemed to embody the very spirit of the forest: flowing linen clothes, an abundance of silver jewelry, and eyes that held a peculiar, knowing twinkle. Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic, as she welcomed them to the sacred space for creative awakening. The weekend commenced with a series of innocuous team-building exercises, trust falls, which Ethan performed with the minimum possible enthusiasm and Harper approached with an almost reckless abandon, blindfolded walks through the woods, where Ethan tried to map out the terrain logically and Harper giggled her way through, bumping into trees, and group discussions that mostly involved Harper trying to infuse emotion and Ethan trying to anchor everything in data. Their dynamic remained unchanged, a constant push and pull, a dance of incompatible energies. Willow observed them closely, her knowing smile never faltering, as if privy to a secret only she understood. On Saturday afternoon, as a vibrant autumn sun dappled through the changing leaves, Willow announced the final, most crucial session, the energetic connection meditation. She led them into a large, circular clearing bathed in golden light, surrounded by towering, ancient oaks. The air felt charged, almost electric. Willow explained, in her gentle, lilting voice, that this meditation was designed to dissolve barriers, to connect deeply with the universal creative flow, and to truly see the world through another's eyes. She instructed them to form a large circle, hold hands, close their eyes, and focus on their deepest intentions for understanding and empathy. Ethan, ever the skeptic, scoffed internally. Energetic connection? This is pure New Age mumbo-jumbo, he thought, but complied reluctantly, not wanting to defy the CEO's explicit instructions for participation. He found himself holding Harper's surprisingly warm hand on one side and a nervous junior copywriter's on the other. He tried to focus on his breathing, mentally calculating how many hours were left until he could escape this bizarre ordeal. Harper, however, embraced the exercise with her usual open-heartedness. She closed her eyes, picturing the essence of understanding, imagining a bridge forming between her chaotic creativity and Ethan's rigid logic. She genuinely wished for a breakthrough, a way to move past the constant friction that defined their working relationship. Willow's voice rose, guiding them through visualization. Feel the energy flowing through you, connecting you to the earth, to each other. Open your minds, open your hearts. Allow yourselves to truly feel the essence of another's being, to walk in their shoes, even for a moment. As she spoke these words, a strange atmospheric phenomenon began to unfold. The sky, which had been a clear, azure blue just moments before, began to churn. Wisps of dark cloud appeared from nowhere, swirling rapidly directly above the clearing. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the ground, growing in intensity. The air grew heavy, thick with static electricity, making the tiny hairs on their arms stand on end. Ethan's eyes flickered open, a flicker of professional concern replacing his skepticism. Harper, though, felt a thrill, a sense of wonder, her artistic soul drawn to the unexpected drama of the sky. Then, without warning, a brilliant, blinding flash erupted from the swirling clouds directly above them. It wasn't a typical lightning strike, it was a bolt of pure, iridescent energy, a spear of cerulean light that plunged straight down into the center of their circle. A deafening crack rent the air, a sound that seemed to tear the fabric of reality itself, followed by a powerful, almost physical shockwave. The participants screamed, some falling backward, others instinctively letting go of hands. Ethan felt an overwhelming jolt, a searing heat that coursed through his entire body, then a sudden, jarring emptiness, as if his very essence had been violently extracted. His last sensation before unconsciousness was a dizzying disorientation, a feeling of being pulled apart and reassembled. Harper experienced something similar, but different. A rush of exhilarating, terrifying energy, like being plugged directly into a cosmic power source. Her world spun, colors exploded behind her eyelids, and then, a profound sense of displacement. Her last conscious thought was a strange, giddy sensation of falling upwards, of her consciousness scattering like stardust. When the group slowly stirred back to awareness, blinking and disoriented, the sky had returned to its pristine blue. Willow stood calmly in the center, a faint smile playing on her lips, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. No one noticed the faint, shimmering aura that seemed to cling to Ethan and Harper for a fleeting moment, an invisible residue of the extraordinary event. The rest of the evening was a blur of nervous chatter and residual adrenaline. No one could explain the freak lightning strike. Ethan, despite his best efforts, felt a persistent buzzing in his head, a strange lightness he couldn't shake. Harper, unusually quiet, felt an odd heaviness, a peculiar groundedness that was entirely alien to her. Both dismissed it as the after-effects of shock and the sheer exhaustion of the intense day. They ate dinner in silence, avoiding eye contact, and retreated to their separate cabins, eager for the weekend to end. Sleep, however, offered no respite. Ethan tossed and turned in his rustic bed, plagued by vivid, unsettling dreams of chaotic colors and overwhelming emotions, sensations that felt utterly un-Ethan. Harper, on the other hand, experienced a night of strange, ordered dreams, visions of perfectly aligned spreadsheets and strategic flowcharts, a relentless pursuit of perfection that left her feeling strangely constricted, even in her sleep. Sunday morning, the final day of the retreat, arrived with a gentle morning light. Ethan awoke in his cabin, a groan escaping his lips. He stretched, feeling a peculiar stiffness in his muscles. As he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and looked down, he froze. His hands, they were slender, delicate, with long, artistic fingers, entirely unlike his own strong, executive hands. He felt a peculiar lightness in his chest, a strange, unfamiliar softness. Panic began to set in. He scrambled out of bed, rushing to the full-length mirror, his heart hammering against his ribs. Staring back at him was Harper Lane's reflection, her wild, auburn hair, her vibrant, expressive eyes, her smaller frame, even the faint scattering of freckles on her nose. He gasped, a high-pitched sound that was entirely un-Ethan. No, this can't be happening," he whispered, his voice Harper's. His world, so rigidly constructed, had just been utterly, irrevocably shattered. Meanwhile, in her own cabin, Harper woke up with a jolt. She felt taller, stronger. She instinctively reached for her hair, expecting a cascade of auburn curls, but her fingers encountered short, neatly styled dark hair. She sat bolt upright, her heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. She looked down at her hands, large, well-manicured, distinctly masculine hands, with a faint scar on the left knuckle. Her stomach lurched. She leaped out of bed, her new, powerful legs carrying her with an unfamiliar stride, and stumbled towards the mirror. Staring back at her was Ethan Cole, his sharp, intelligent eyes, his defined jawline, his strong physique, and he was wearing his signature crisp white button-down shirt that she had seen him wear yesterday. The same shirt that had probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Her initial horror quickly gave way to a wave of bewildered hilarity. A nervous, high-pitched giggle escaped her lips, a sound that was distinctly Harper, yet came from Ethan's throat. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice surprisingly deep and resonant. "This is going to be a disaster." She then burst into an uncontrollable fit of laughter, an utterly inappropriate response to what was undeniably, the most shocking event of her life. The world, it seemed, had just played its most elaborate and utterly absurd, practical joke. Their bodies had swapped, and the real chaos was only just beginning. The initial shock of the body swap quickly gave way to a maelstrom of panic and disbelief for Ethan, and a cocktail of horror and bewildered amusement for Harper. Ethan, trapped in Harper's body, stared at his new reflection, his meticulously ordered mind reeling. His first instinct was to find a logical explanation, a scientific anomaly, a dream. But the sharp, undeniable reality of Harper's softer curves, her vibrant, unruly hair, and the faint, sweet scent of her perfume clinging to her skin, told him otherwise. He tried to think, to plan, to strategize, but his brain felt fuzzy, overwhelmed by unfamiliar emotions. He stumbled around the cabin, tripping over Harper's scattered clothes, feeling utterly disoriented by the shift in his center of gravity. Everything felt too small, too delicate. He even tried to replicate his usual confident stride, only to find himself tottering on Harper's much lighter feet. Meanwhile, in Ethan's body, Harper was experiencing a different kind of sensory overload. The sheer height was exhilarating, the muscular frame felt powerful, and the expensive fabric of Ethan's shirt felt alien yet strangely comforting against her skin. After her initial burst of disbelieving laughter, a wave of practicality hit her. Okay, this is insane, she muttered, her voice rumbling with Ethan's deep baritone. But everything happens for a reason, right? She tried to calm herself, but the urge to explore her new physical capabilities was too strong. She flexed Ethan's biceps, admiring the definition, then made a playful, exaggerated growl. It was ridiculous, terrifying, and utterly fascinating all at once. Her artistic mind, always drawn to the absurd, found a perverse kind of thrill in the situation, even as a cold knot of dread formed in her stomach about the implications. Their urgent need to connect and figure out this impossible situation led them to a frantic, whispered conversation outside their respective cabins, hidden behind a thicket of pine trees. Ethan, with Harper's voice, sounded frantic. "This is preposterous. Unacceptable. We need to find Willow, the retreat leader. She must have an explanation, a cure." He gesticulated wildly with Harper's hands, which felt unnervingly expressive. Harper, in Ethan's body, tried to project calm, though her internal monologue was pure chaos. "Whoa, calm down, Ethan," she said, her voice deep and authoritative, strangely comforting coming from him. "Panicking isn't going to help. We can't let anyone know. Think about our careers. This is Brightwave, not a circus freak show." She shivered, despite the warmth of Ethan's expensive shirt. The thought of their professional lives being utterly destroyed by this bizarre event was a sobering one. The reality of their predicament sunk in. They had to be each other. At least until they could find a way to reverse the swap. This realization, in itself, was a setup for a string of immediate, catastrophic blunders. Their first challenge was the mandatory closing breakfast. Ethan, as Harper, struggled immensely. He usually ate a precisely measured, high-protein breakfast. Now, confronted with Harper's usual chaotic choices, a bagel slathered with cream cheese, a sugary pastry, and a lukewarm cup of herbal tea, he felt his meticulously maintained internal balance revolt. He tried to mimic Harper's casual eating style, but ended up daintily nibbling the pastry, looking utterly out of place. His internal monologue was a cascade of complaints. Too sweet. Too messy. This is completely inefficient fuel for the day. He found himself unconsciously crossing his legs at the ankle, a gesture Harper never made, and had to quickly uncross them, feeling awkward and exposed. Harper, as Ethan, found the breakfast surprisingly easy. Ethan's typical meal was a small, perfectly peeled apple and black coffee. Harper, used to more indulgence, found herself secretly adding extra sugar to Ethan's coffee and eyeing the plate of crispy bacon with longing. She had to consciously suppress a burp and remembered to maintain Ethan's stoic, analytical expression, a task that felt like holding her breath. She also had to resist the urge to draw a silly doodle on the pristine white tablecloth. The effort of acting Ethan was exhausting. The first major disaster struck during the final creative workshop, a seemingly innocuous group discussion. Arthur Sterling himself had arrived for the closing session, expecting to see a new spirit of collaboration. He spoke of the Luminique campaign, its strategic importance, and the need for innovation blended with market insight. Ethan, as Harper, was supposed to take notes, as Harper usually did, but her mind was racing, trying to process the CEO's words through Harper's artistic lens. He struggled to even hold Harper's favorite gel pen correctly, his grip feeling clumsy. When Arthur made a particularly dry joke about market trends, a joke Ethan would usually acknowledge with a slight, knowing nod, Harper, in Ethan's body, let out a sudden, loud, uninhibited burst of laughter. It was a genuine, high-pitched giggle, completely out of character for the usually serious creative lead. The entire room went silent. Arthur Sterling paused, one eyebrow raised in surprise, his gaze fixed on Ethan. Harper immediately clamped her hand over Ethan's mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She tried to quickly transform it into a cough, but the damage was done. The junior copywriter next to her looked on with a mixture of fear and amusement. "Ethan, are you quite all right?" Arthur asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "Something amuse you?" Harper, scrambling, managed a muffled, "Just a tickle in the throat, sir." Excellent point about synergy, though. She tried to sound serious, but her face, Ethan's face, was flushed, and a tremor of suppressed mirth still shook her. Ethan, as Harper, shot her a furious, silent glare. "You almost just got us fired." His eyes screamed. The embarrassment was almost too much for Harper to bear, but the thought of being exposed was worse. She mentally filed it away under things I need to be more careful about. Back at Brightwave on Monday morning, the real challenges began. The office environment, with its intricate web of social cues and unspoken rules, was a minefield. Ethan, as Harper, walked into the creative department, feeling utterly exposed. He was hyper-aware of Harper's clothes, which suddenly felt too bright, too flowing, too Harper. He tried to mimic her slightly slouched, casual walk, but it felt unnatural, like wearing a costume. His first shock was Harper's workstation. He stared at the explosion of colorful post-it notes, the overflowing mug of pens, the tangled mess of charging cables, and the astonishing number of browser tabs open on her laptop, a staggering 39. Each one seemed to lead to a different rabbit hole: abstract expressionism techniques, cat videos for creative inspiration, best coffee shops NYC, latest fashion trends, philosophy of art. He felt an actual physical pain in his orderly soul. How can anyone work like this? This is an affront to efficiency. His struggle was evident. He attempted to navigate Harper's computer, a device clearly optimized for artistic whimsy rather than logical workflow. He found himself lost in a labyrinth of files, each named with poetic titles like Whispers of Dawn or Echoes of Starlight, rather than the organized project codes he was accustomed to. He missed 3 important internal emails because Harper's inbox was a chaotic, unread mess. He felt a rising wave of anxiety, something Ethan Cole rarely experienced. Harper, meanwhile, was having a surprisingly easy time navigating Ethan's pristine desk. His computer was a dream of organization, perfectly labeled folders, a clean desktop, and not a single unnecessary tab open. She found his meticulous project notes, his perfectly crafted marketing plans, and realized the sheer volume of detailed work he put into every single campaign. It was intimidating, but also incredibly impressive. She found herself actually learning about strategic planning, something she'd always dismissed as boring. However, the urge for rebellion was strong. During a lull, she impulsively used Ethan's company credit card, a card she had always associated with his expensive tastes, to purchase a pair of ridiculously comfortable, brightly colored yoga pants online, reasoning, "Ethan probably needs to relax a bit, and hey, these are for my comfort." She giggled internally at the thought of Ethan's horror if he ever found out. Later that week, Ethan had to endure Harper's social life. Harper's best friend, Chloe, a bubbly, outspoken graphic designer from a rival agency, called, insisting on a spontaneous happy hour. Ethan, as Harper, had no choice but to agree. He spent an agonizing hour in Harper's apartment, a vibrant, eclectic space filled with art, books, and plants, trying to find an appropriate outfit. He finally settled on a flowing, bohemian-style dress that felt ridiculously uncomfortable. The absolute horror came when he realized Harper, being Harper, never wore makeup, or at least, never wore much. He had to attempt to put on lipstick, a task that proved monumentally difficult for his unpracticed hands. The result was a slightly smudged, garish red smear that made him look, as he internally described it, like a sophisticated clown. Chloe, bless her heart, only laughed and said, "Harper, you look edgy tonight. Did you try something new?" Ethan forced a smile, feeling every fiber of his being cringe. He spent the entire evening trying to feign interest in Chloe's animated stories about her latest art exhibition, while secretly just wanting to escape to the quiet, logical confines of his own, Harper's, apartment. He found himself checking his, Harper's, watch almost compulsively, a habit Chloe had always teased Harper about. The days blurred into a series of awkward encounters and near misses. Harper, as Ethan, struggled with the corporate lingo in meetings, often replacing technical terms with more colorful, artistic metaphors that drew bewildered stares from junior executives. She found herself doodling on Ethan's immaculate notepads during particularly dry presentations, only to hastily erase her creations when someone looked over her shoulder. She also had to consciously slow her natural, expressive hand gestures, replacing them with Ethan's controlled, deliberate movements. She almost blew their cover when she instinctively offered a genuine, heartfelt compliment to a junior designer on a visually stunning, but strategically flawed layout, something Ethan Cole would never have done. Ethan, as Harper, had to grapple with the emotional nuances of Harper's job. He found himself tearing up during a particularly moving commercial pitch, a reaction that horrified his logical brain. He also had to deal with casual sexism in the office. One afternoon, a senior male executive, Mr. Thompson, made a dismissive comment about Harper's fluffy ideas during a casual hallway conversation, assuming he was speaking to Harper. Ethan felt an unexpected surge of protective anger, something entirely alien to his usual detached professional demeanor. He wanted to lash out, to defend Harper, but knew he had to maintain character. He simply forced a tight, polite smile, fuming internally. So this is what she deals with? The cumulative effect of these daily disasters was both exhausting and strangely illuminating. Each gaffe, each uncomfortable moment, chipped away at their preconceived notions of each other. Ethan began to see the immense pressure Harper faced, not just to be creative, but to be taken seriously in a male-dominated environment that often undervalued her intuitive approach. Harper, through inhabiting Ethan's disciplined world, began to understand the weight of responsibility he carried, the relentless pursuit of perfection that drove him, and the strategic complexities he expertly navigated. The initial horror and hilarity were slowly giving way to a grudging respect, a nascent understanding that transcended their superficial differences. The true irony, they were beginning to realize, was that by becoming their enemy, they were finally, truly, seeing each other for the very first time. The initial weeks of their unwilling body swap were a chaotic ballet of near catastrophes and frantic cover-ups. Each day presented a new challenge, a fresh opportunity for either Ethan or Harper to inadvertently expose their impossible secret. Yet, amidst the daily blunders and the constant, simmering anxiety of discovery, a peculiar transformation began to unfold. By being forced to live inside each other's skins, to navigate each other's professional and personal landscapes, they started to see the world not just through the other's eyes, but as the other. The veneer of their long-held animosity, painstakingly built over years of office rivalry, began to crack, revealing the complex, often vulnerable, individuals beneath. Ethan, trapped in Harper's body, found himself confronting realities he had never before considered. He had always dismissed Harper's creative process as unstructured and her emotional responses as impractical. Now he was living it. He discovered that Harper's disorganized desk wasn't a sign of sloppiness, but a physical manifestation of a mind constantly brimming with ideas, connections, and inspirations that defied linear categorization. Her 39 open tabs, which had initially sent shivers down his spine, were actually a dynamic web of research and conceptual exploration, each tab a potential spark for her next brilliant idea. He began to appreciate the sheer volume of mental output required to maintain such a fluid, imaginative state. One afternoon, he, as Harper, sat in on a creative brainstorming session for a new social media campaign. A senior male colleague, Mark, casually dismissed one of Harper's, now Ethan's, most innovative concepts as too out there, not scalable for our target demographic. Ethan felt a familiar surge of his own analytical mind wanting to dissect the flaw, but then he, as Harper, heard the dismissive tone, saw the subtle eye rolls from other male team members. He recognized the undercurrent of casual dismissal, the way Harper's ideas were often undervalued simply because they didn't fit into the conventional, masculine-dominated framework of the advertising world. He saw how Harper had to constantly fight to prove the validity of her intuitive, emotionally driven ideas in a space that prioritized cold, hard data. He realized the immense pressure she constantly endured, not just to be creative, but to justify her very approach against ingrained biases. The fluffy ideas he had always criticized now felt like bold, vulnerable expressions of artistic courage. "This is not just about scalability, Mark," Ethan found himself saying, his voice Harper's, but with an uncharacteristic sharpness. "It's about resonance. It's about tapping into an emotional truth that market data alone can't capture. If we only chase what's scalable, we'll end up with campaigns that are safe, but forgettable." Harper's idea has the potential for virality precisely because it's unexpected, it's bold. It dares to make people feel. The words, though spoken by Harper, were Ethan's convictions, forged by his newfound understanding. The room went silent, a few colleagues exchanging surprised glances. Harper, in Ethan's body, watched, a flicker of appreciation in her eyes. It was the first time she'd seen Ethan genuinely defend her creative philosophy, even if it was through her own mouth. Conversely, Harper, inhabiting Ethan's disciplined and outwardly stoic persona, began to peel back the layers of his perceived arrogance. She quickly realized that his obsession with control and perfection wasn't born of malice, but of a deep-seated fear of failure. She unearthed old project files on his computer, meticulously archived postmortems of a campaign from 2 years prior that had spectacularly tanked. The detailed analysis, the self-critical notes, the sheer volume of effort he had put into understanding what went wrong, it was all there. He had taken the failure personally, internalized it, and had since been relentlessly driving himself and his team to avoid any repeat. His coldness was a shield, a protective mechanism against appearing vulnerable, against being perceived as a weak leader. Harper also witnessed firsthand the immense pressure Ethan faced from Arthur Sterling, who, while supportive, held Ethan to an incredibly high standard. She sat through strategic meetings where Ethan had to present complex financial projections and market forecasts, his calm demeanor masking the intense mental gymnastics required. She realized that his focus on logic wasn't a lack of emotion, but a pragmatic tool to navigate a high-stakes corporate environment where missteps had severe consequences. She saw the quiet burden of leadership, the relentless demand for strategic foresight, and the constant battle to stay ahead in a cutthroat industry. His robot exterior was less about being emotionless and more about being constantly on, upholding an image of impenetrable confidence. One particularly stressful afternoon, the team was facing a tight deadline for a crucial client presentation. Tensions were high and a junior designer, overwhelmed, made a significant error in a key visual. Ethan, as Harper, saw the designer on the verge of tears, expecting a furious rebuke from Ethan. But Harper, in Ethan's body, remembered the feeling of creative vulnerability, the sting of criticism. Instead of Ethan's usual sharp, analytical critique, she walked over to the designer's desk. "Hey, Harper," in Ethan's deep voice, said gently, surprising everyone, including herself. "It's okay. Mistakes happen, especially under pressure. Let's look at this together. What if we shifted this element here, just slightly? It maintains the integrity of your original vision, but addresses the client's feedback." She leaned in, pointing to the screen, her new posture surprisingly empathetic. Then, with a mischievous twinkle in Ethan's eyes, she added, "And honestly, the first draft is rarely perfect. Even the great Picasso made a few duds before he painted Guernica, right?" She winked, something Ethan Cole would never do. A wave of laughter rippled through the stressed team. The designer, relieved, actually cracked a smile. The atmosphere, which had been thick with tension, visibly lightened. Harper had instinctively channeled her own supportive, easygoing nature, using Ethan's authority to create a more human, less intimidating work environment. Ethan, as Harper, watched stunned. He had never seen his team laugh like that during a crisis. He realized the value of a lighter touch, of genuine encouragement, something he, in his relentless pursuit of perfection, had often neglected. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their interactions shifted. The barbed comments became less frequent, replaced by a cautious curiosity. They began to unconsciously protect each other in office situations, using the other's body and position to advocate for the other's innate strengths. Ethan, as Harper, now acutely aware of the subtle sexism and artistic dismissal Harper often faced, found himself speaking up more frequently in meetings, challenging conventional wisdom with Harper's own eloquent, emotionally resonant arguments. But now backed by the unexpected authority of Harper's newfound assertiveness. He championed Harper's original, more abstract concepts for the Luminique campaign, infusing them with a strategic logic he now understood was necessary, but defending their emotional core. One day, during a review with Arthur Sterling, Ethan, as Harper, passionately defended a conceptual visual that was pure Harper, abstract, evocative, and initially deemed too risky by the marketing team. Sir, he as Harper, argued, the market is saturated with safe, predictable imagery. Luminique is about unveiling a hidden facet of self. This visual, while bold, speaks directly to that intimate journey. It's not about what you see, but what you feel. He quoted some of Harper's own artistic philosophies, but now with a strategic underpinning, demonstrating how the emotional impact could lead to stronger brand recall and engagement. Arthur, impressed, nodded slowly. Harper, that's a remarkably articulate defense. I see your point. Ethan felt a quiet triumph. He was finally getting Harper's voice heard, truly heard, in this corporate echo chamber. Harper, as Ethan, witnessing the pressure Ethan was under, the constant demands for strategic brilliance and leadership, found herself instinctively softening his image. She'd crack an unexpected joke in a tense team meeting, a lighthearted comment that diffused stress and made the team feel more at ease. She even started leaving little handwritten notes on Ethan's desk, encouraging words or silly doodles, which bewildered his assistant but subtly improved team morale. She was using Ethan's authority to inject warmth and humanity into the often cold corporate environment, something Ethan, in his rigid adherence to professionalism, rarely allowed himself to do. During a particularly grueling all-nighter for the Luminique campaign, Harper, as Ethan, saw a junior designer struggling with burnout. Ethan would have typically pushed harder, demanded more efficiency. But Harper, remembering her own struggles with creative exhaustion, walked over and gently suggested, "Take a break. Go get some fresh air. A clear mind is more productive than a tired one. We'll be here." The designer, clearly shocked by Ethan's uncharacteristic empathy, looked genuinely grateful. Ethan, as Harper, saw this exchange and felt a pang of something unfamiliar, pride, perhaps, or a quiet sense of admiration. Through these daily trials and surprising moments of advocacy, a profound shift occurred. They were no longer just adversaries. They were co-conspirators in an impossible secret, navigating a bewildering new reality, and in doing so, they were seeing the depth, the struggles, and the unexpected brilliance in each other. Ethan understood Harper's passion, her vulnerability, and the quiet resilience it took to be authentically creative in a world that often demanded conformity. Harper saw Ethan's hidden fears, his immense sense of responsibility, and the strategic genius that fueled his success, realizing it wasn't coldness, but a fierce dedication. They were learning, through the most intimate means possible, that their initial judgments had been incomplete, even unfair. They were becoming allies, bound by an extraordinary secret, and slowly, a fragile bridge of understanding began to form across the chasm of their past animosity. The Luminique campaign, once a symbol of their conflict, was quietly becoming the canvas for their unlikely, transformative journey. As Ethan and Harper continued to navigate the labyrinthine complexities of each other's lives, the forced intimacy of the body swap began to peel back layers far deeper than mere professional understanding. Beyond the office dynamics and the public personas they maintained lay the private sanctuaries of their homes, their memories, and their unspoken fears. Living each other's lives wasn't just about mimicking daily routines, it was about inhabiting their very souls, stumbling upon the raw, unfiltered truths they kept hidden from the world. Ethan, in Harper's body, found himself constantly surprised by the emotional landscape of her life. Her apartment, once a symbol of her chaotic nature, now felt like a vibrant, living archive of her passions. There were half-finished canvases, stacks of poetry books, a well-loved guitar in the corner, and a collection of eclectic trinkets from her travels. He discovered her hidden journal, filled not with daily schedules or strategic plans, but with vivid descriptions of her dreams, her artistic aspirations, and moments of profound insecurity. He read about her frustration with male colleagues who underestimated her, her yearning for a deeper creative connection, and her quiet anxieties about financial stability as a freelance artist before Brightwave. He saw a Harper far more vulnerable, far more thoughtful, than the brash, overly confident copywriter he'd always known. One evening, while searching Harper's messy bedside drawer for an allergy pill, a small, human detail he was now intimately acquainted with, he stumbled upon a box filled with old photographs. Among them, he found a collection of letters, unsent and addressed to her mother, who had passed away when Harper was in college. They were raw, heartfelt confessions of loneliness, the struggle to find her voice, and a deep longing for connection. He read Harper's scribbled notes on the back of a faded photo. "Mom, I hope you'd be proud of my chaos. It's where the best ideas live." He felt a profound pang, a wave of empathy that surprised him. Her chaos wasn't a flaw, it was a legacy, a deliberate choice to live vibrantly in the face of loss. He realized that her belief in everything happens for a reason wasn't just an optimistic mantra, but a coping mechanism, a way to find meaning in a world that had once dealt her a harsh blow. Meanwhile, Harper, in Ethan's body, was delving into a world of stark contrasts. Ethan's apartment was the antithesis of Harper's, minimalist, impeccably organized, and filled with sleek, modern furniture. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end showroom. Yet, beneath the polished surfaces, she began to uncover the echoes of a hidden past. On his pristine desk, tucked away beneath a stack of financial journals, she found an old, worn leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a journal, but a collection of meticulous notes on a variety of subjects: stock market trends, architectural design principles, and, surprisingly, classical music theory. But what truly captured her attention was a series of unsent letters, meticulously typed, addressed to his deceased father. Ethan had never spoken about his father, a renowned architect who had passed away unexpectedly a few years prior. The letters were a raw, vulnerable outpouring of Ethan's deepest fears and anxieties, his fear of not living up to his father's legacy, his terror of failure, and the immense pressure he felt to constantly prove his worth. "Dad," one letter read, "I'm trying. I'm building what you taught me, but sometimes the fear of letting you down is suffocating. I just wish you could tell me if I'm doing enough." Harper, reading these words, felt a profound ache in her chest. The robot was, in fact, intensely human, driven by a powerful, unspoken grief and an almost crippling need for validation. His rigid perfectionism wasn't just about control, it was about honoring a lost legacy, a desperate attempt to fill an unfillable void. Harper also stumbled upon a hidden playlist on Ethan's usually work-focused Spotify. It wasn't classical music, as she might have expected, but a collection of indie folk and melancholic instrumental pieces, music that spoke of quiet reflection and longing. It was a stark contrast to his public persona, revealing a private, contemplative side she never knew existed. She even found a worn copy of a book on Stoic philosophy, its pages underlined with his precise script, passages about enduring hardship and maintaining inner calm. This wasn't the Ethan Cole who commanded boardrooms. This was a man grappling with his internal world, seeking solace and strength in ancient wisdom. These intimate discoveries, made through the involuntary act of living each other's lives, profoundly shifted their perception. The animosity that had defined their relationship began to dissolve, replaced by a complex tapestry of empathy, respect, and a nascent, surprising admiration. Ethan, now experiencing Harper's relentless battle against self-doubt despite her outward confidence, found himself admiring her resilience. He had always seen her artistic nature as a weakness, a susceptibility to emotion. Now he saw it as her greatest strength, her capacity to feel deeply, to connect with the human experience, and to translate that into compelling narratives. He admired her unwavering belief in herself, even when others tried to diminish her. He even found himself adopting some of Harper's unique habits, listening to her favorite podcasts during her commute, sketching idle designs in the margins of her notepads, and finding a strange comfort in the vibrant chaos of her apartment. He started to understand how she used her art as a shield, a way to process the world and express her often unheard voice. Harper, witnessing Ethan's quiet grief and the immense pressure he put on himself, realized the depth of his character. His stoicism wasn't indifference, it was a profound sense of duty and a deeply ingrained emotional restraint. She admired his unwavering commitment, his intellectual rigor, and the quiet dignity with which he carried his burdens. She also discovered his secret ritual. Every morning, before facing the grueling demands of the day, Ethan would listen to a specific, uplifting classical piece, a quiet moment of preparation and focus. It was his version of Harper's self-affirmation recordings, a silent ritual of fortifying his mind against the chaos of the world. Harper, in Ethan's body, found herself doing the same, a strange, comforting echo of his quiet strength. The admiration they felt for each other was subtle, unspoken, yet deeply profound. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was a powerful recognition of each other's inherent worth and the hidden struggles they both navigated. They began to anticipate each other's reactions, to understand the subtle cues that revealed their true selves beneath the swapped exteriors. Ethan, seeing the world through Harper's eyes, started to find beauty in the unexpected, to appreciate the subtle nuances of human connection that his logical mind had always overlooked. Harper, through Ethan's lens, began to appreciate the power of structure, the elegance of strategic thought, and the quiet satisfaction of meticulous planning. Their professional collaboration on the Luminique campaign also underwent a radical transformation. Their ideas, once clashing, now began to interweave seamlessly. Ethan, in Harper's body, could now articulate Harper's creative visions with a strategic clarity that even Arthur Sterling couldn't deny. He championed her abstract concepts, but grounded them in data-driven insights. Harper, in Ethan's body, could inject warmth and emotional resonance into Ethan's meticulously crafted marketing plans, making them more relatable, more human. They were becoming a truly formidable team, their individual strengths amplifying, rather than canceling out, each other's. One afternoon, as Harper, was presenting a creative concept infused with a strategic twist, he saw Harper, as Ethan, nod subtly, a rare, almost imperceptible gesture of approval that spoke volumes. It was a moment of quiet connection, a shared understanding that transcended their physical separation. They were two minds, now deeply attuned, navigating a shared reality in borrowed bodies. The profound irony was not lost on them. It had taken this impossible, magical event to reveal the fundamental humanity and brilliance they had both dismissed in each other. Their personal secrets, once guarded fiercely, had become the bridges to a deeper, more empathetic connection, setting the stage for a bond that neither could have ever imagined. The Luminique campaign was rapidly approaching its final presentation, a crucible moment for Brightwave. The pressure mounted, but the strange, symbiotic understanding between Ethan and Harper had transformed their collaboration from a tense standoff into an almost telepathic flow. They anticipated each other's needs, filled in each other's gaps, and presented a unified front that impressed everyone at the agency. Yet, despite their professional synergy, the personal quandary of their body swap remained unsolved. The deeper they delved into each other's lives, the more acutely they felt the urgency to reverse the spell. The only lead they had was the mysterious retreat, the Catalyst Grove, and its enigmatic facilitator, Willow. After extensive, discreet research, Ethan, as Harper, meticulously combing through old retreat brochures, and Harper, as Ethan, using Ethan's high-level access to search for any unusual meteorological reports from that fateful day. They found a cryptic reference in one of Willow's online articles. It spoke of a rare energetic alignment, amplified by specific natural phenomena, that could trigger profound personal transformation, sometimes manifesting in unexpected ways, but always reversible through a complete and authentic energetic recalibration rooted in mutual understanding. It was vague, poetic, and utterly unscientific, yet it was their only hope. The key, it seemed, was to return to the source. They decided to go back to the Catalyst Grove the following weekend, under the guise of conducting post-retreat research for a client. Arthur Sterling, seeing the phenomenal progress on Luminique, readily approved their request, even complimenting Ethan on his, Harper's, newfound initiative and Harper on her, Ethan's, surprisingly pragmatic approach. Their return journey was less tense than the first. Ethan, as Harper, packed a carefully curated minimalist bag, still struggling with the sheer volume of stuff Harper owned, but now with a grudging appreciation for her vibrant style. Harper, as Ethan, packed a more relaxed, comfortable wardrobe for Ethan, even slipping in a pair of the colorful yoga pants she'd bought with his card, much to her secret amusement. They even managed a few guarded jokes, a surprising lightness in their exchanges that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Upon arrival at the Catalyst Grove, they found the retreat largely deserted for the off-season. Willow, however, was there, tending to her herb garden. When they approached her, explaining their unusual experience after the meditation and the lightning strike, Willow simply smiled, her eyes twinkling with knowing amusement. "Ah, the great recalibration," she murmured, as if discussing the weather. "A powerful energy indeed. It seeks balance, truth. And it provides lessons, often in the most unexpected forms." She explained that the reversal would occur naturally once their souls were truly aligned, once they had genuinely walked a mile in each other's shoes and found a profound, mutual understanding. "It is not a spell to be broken, but a lesson to be learned," she concluded, before offering them a small, secluded cabin at the edge of the property, away from the main lodge, for their research. As fate would have it, a fierce, unseasonal snowstorm descended upon the region that evening, a sudden blizzard that coated the landscape in a thick blanket of white. The roads became impassable, power lines flickered, and soon, their small cabin was plunged into darkness, isolated from the rest of the retreat. They were stranded, just the two of them, in their swapped bodies, surrounded by the silent, relentless snowfall. The cabin was cozy but small. A crackling fireplace provided their only source of heat and light, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The initial novelty of the situation quickly gave way to a profound sense of awkwardness. Here they were, two individuals who had once been bitter rivals, now sharing a cramped space, each intimately aware of the other's physical form. Ethan, in Harper's body, found himself feeling strangely vulnerable. Harper's clothes felt thin in the cold, her smaller frame more susceptible to the chill. He wrapped a thick blanket around himself, but the unfamiliar sensation of being physically weaker, less imposing, was unsettling. He found himself subtly hunching, trying to make Harper's body feel less exposed. Harper, in Ethan's body, felt a different kind of discomfort. Ethan's masculine form, while strong, felt almost too large, too powerful in the confined space. She found herself acutely aware of his broad shoulders, his strong hands, feeling a strange mix of power and self-consciousness. She tried to make herself smaller, though it was difficult in Ethan's imposing frame. The silence, punctuated only by the howling wind and the crackling fire, amplified their awareness of each other. They sat across from each other on makeshift cushions on the floor, sipping hot herbal tea Willow had given them, the only light coming from the dancing flames. The usual office banter, the professional masks, were impossible to maintain in such an intimate, isolated setting. The cold forced them closer to the fire, closer to each other. So Harper, in Ethan's deep voice, finally broke the silence, her voice a little shaky. "This is cozy." She attempted a nervous chuckle, which came out as a surprisingly masculine rumble. Ethan, in Harper's voice, wrapped in his blanket, replied, "Cozy isn't exactly the word I'd choose. More like a forced exercise in existential discomfort." He tried to sound detached, but the cold and the strangeness of the situation made it difficult. The conversation drifted slowly, cautiously. They talked about the Luminique campaign, their shared excitement at its potential success, a testament to their unlikely partnership. But as the night wore on, fueled by the warmth of the fire and the shared isolation, the conversation deepened. The boundaries between their swapped identities began to blur, and they started to speak not just as Ethan and Harper, but as the persons they had become through this bizarre journey. "I never realized Ethan, in Harper's body," admitted, his voice quiet, the sheer weight of being a woman in this industry. The constant need to assert yourself, to be heard, to fight against preconceived notions. "I always thought you were just emotional. But now I see it's often a defense, a way to make your voice powerful when it's constantly being dismissed." He shifted, looking into the fire. "And that comment from Mr. Thompson. I wanted to break his nose." The raw anger, a feeling Harper had felt countless times, was now genuinely Ethan's. Harper, in Ethan's body, nodded, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "And I never understood the pressure to always be strong, always in control. To lead. To never show weakness. I always thought you were just cold, unfeeling. But seeing your father's letters, reading about his expectations. I get it now. It's a heavy burden, carrying that kind of legacy. You're not a robot, Ethan. You're just afraid to let anyone see you bleed." Her voice, deep and resonant, was filled with an unexpected tenderness. Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze across the fire. The firelight flickered across Harper's, his face, revealing a vulnerability he rarely showed. "Perhaps," he said, his voice softer than Harper had ever heard it, "I've never truly listened to anyone. Not really listened, understood their core motivations, their struggles, until I lived in you. Until I felt what you feel." A profound realization settled over him. His meticulous nature had always prevented him from truly connecting, from letting down his guard. Living as Harper had forced him to open himself up to emotion, to empathy. Harper, in Ethan's body, smiled gently, a rare, genuine smile that softened Ethan's strong features. "And I never knew what it was like to bear that kind of pressure, to be the one everyone looks to for answers, to be strong all the time. My world was about feeling, about expression. Your world is about resilience, about strategic fortitude. It's exhausting to maintain that front. I actually admire you for it, more than you know." Her admiration was palpable, heartfelt. They continued to talk for hours, sharing intimate details they had never confessed to anyone else. Ethan spoke of his lonely childhood, the intense academic pressure, his quiet artistic aspirations that he had suppressed to follow a more sensible career path. He confessed his fear that without his meticulous control, he would simply fall apart, lose everything he had painstakingly built. Harper, in turn, spoke of her deep longing for a family, her struggles with self-doubt despite her outward confidence, and her secret fear of being seen as merely the creative one, rather than a serious, intelligent professional. She confessed that her "everything happens for a reason" mantra was sometimes just a hopeful whisper in the face of daunting challenges. As the night deepened, the storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, a profound quietude settled between them. The cold pressed in, but the warmth of the fire and the unexpected warmth of their shared vulnerability felt like a powerful shield. They looked at each other, seeing not their own reflection, but the person they had come to know so intimately, so unexpectedly. The masks were gone. The rivalry was a distant memory. All that remained was raw, honest humanity, exposed by the extraordinary circumstances. This forced isolation, this unintentional intimacy, had become the catalyst for a connection far deeper than either could have ever anticipated. They had bared their souls, and in doing so, had created a bond that transcended the physical, transcended their identities, and perhaps, transcended even the magic that had brought them together. The long, revealing night in the snowbound cabin, sharing their deepest fears and aspirations, had forged a bond between Ethan and Harper that was both fragile and profoundly powerful. The relentless blizzard outside seemed to mirror the emotional storm that had raged within them for years, now finally calming into a quiet, understanding stillness. As the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the cabin window, painting the room in hues of soft gray and blue, a peculiar shift occurred. They had fallen asleep, huddled near the dying embers of the fire, exhausted by the emotional intensity of the night. Ethan, in Harper's body, had inadvertently leaned his head against Ethan's, shoulder, finding a strange comfort in the familiar strength of Ethan's frame, even if it wasn't his own. Harper, in Ethan's body, had allowed herself to relax completely, her natural warmth radiating against Ethan's, head. Their breathing had synchronized, a silent testament to the intimate connection they had forged. Just as the sun's first golden rays pierced through the dense, snow-laden trees, casting a brilliant, ethereal light across the cabin, a soft, resonant hum began to emanate from the very air around them. It was a sound similar to the one they had heard just before the lightning strike, but this time it was gentle, soothing, like a cosmic tuning fork. A faint, shimmering aura, almost imperceptible, enveloped their sleeping forms. It pulsed softly, a warm, golden glow that seemed to emanate from within them, then swirl around them, intertwining their energetic fields. Ethan stirred first, a deep, contented sigh escaping his lips. He stretched, feeling a familiar stiffness in his shoulders, a distinct weight in his limbs that was utterly unlike Harper's slender grace. He blinked, the early morning light momentarily blinding him. As he opened his eyes fully, he looked down at his hands, expecting to see Harper's delicate fingers. Instead, he saw his own strong, executive hands, the faint scar on his left knuckle, unmistakable. His heart gave a jolt, a surge of adrenaline mixed with profound, dizzying relief. He instinctively reached for his hair, feeling the familiar texture of his own neatly styled dark hair. It was him. He was back. At the exact same moment, Harper gasped, a small, breathless sound. She stretched her own limbs, feeling a lightness, a fluidity that was distinctly hers. She looked down, her gaze falling on her own artistic hands, her long, slender fingers. She brought them up to her face, touching her wild, auburn hair, feeling the familiar cascade of curls around her shoulders. She was back. She was in her own body. They both sat bolt upright, staring at each other across the dying fire, their eyes wide with disbelief, wonder, and an almost overwhelming sense of relief. Ethan, his own voice returning, clear and resonant, was the first to speak. "Harper," he breathed, his voice tinged with awe. Harper, her own voice, bright and melodic, replied, "Ethan, we did it." A joyous, relieved laugh bubbled up from her throat, a sound that was purely, unmistakably Harper. They scrambled to their feet, feeling their own bodies, relishing the familiar sensations, the comfort of inhabiting their true selves once more. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, stretched his powerful legs, feeling a groundedness he hadn't realized he'd missed. Harper twirled, enjoying the lightness of her own frame, reveling in the freedom of movement. Then, they looked at each other again, and this time, everything was different. The animosity, the rivalry, the ingrained judgments, they were all gone, swept away by the profound experience of truly knowing each other. In their place was a deep, quiet respect, a powerful empathy, and an undeniable connection that had been forged in the most extraordinary circumstances. The awkwardness of their borrowed bodies was replaced by a different kind of awkwardness, the uncertainty of how to navigate this new, transformed relationship in their original forms. But the feeling of genuine gratitude and understanding was paramount. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice sincere, his gaze direct. "Thank you for showing me your world. For making me see." He meant it. He had learned more about humanity, about himself, in those few weeks than in his entire adult life. Harper's eyes, usually so bright and mischievous, were now soft, filled with a newfound depth. "No, Ethan. Thank you. For letting me see yours. For showing me that strength isn't just about logic, it's about courage, too." She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. They walked out of the cabin into the pristine, snow-covered landscape, the storm having passed, leaving behind a world sparkling under the morning sun. The air was crisp, clean, and filled with a sense of renewal. Willow was there, clearing the snow from the path, her serene smile unwavering. She simply nodded at them, a knowing twinkle in her eyes, as if their transformation was exactly as she had predicted. "The universe," she said softly, "always seeks balance. When two souls truly align, when understanding becomes genuine, the energetic pathways right themselves." Back in the city, back in the bustling offices of Brightwave, everything felt strangely the same, yet profoundly different. Ethan returned to his meticulously organized desk, but now he sometimes found himself unconsciously tapping his foot to an indie folk tune he'd learned from Harper's playlist. He still dressed in his sharp suits, but there was a new lightness in his step, a softer look in his eyes. He occasionally even left a post-it note on his desk, a small doodle or an inspirational quote, a tiny nod to the creative chaos he now understood. Harper returned to her vibrant, messy desk, but now there was a subtle undercurrent of order. She still had her multitude of tabs open, but she found herself occasionally closing a few, prioritizing tasks with a newfound efficiency. She still dressed in her eclectic style, but sometimes she'd pair a flowing dress with a surprisingly structured blazer, a subtle blending of her and Ethan's worlds. She even found herself starting her mornings with a brief, uplifting classical piece, a quiet moment of focus before diving into her creative work. The Luminique campaign, once a source of their bitter rivalry, became their shared triumph. Armed with their profound, mutual understanding, they approached the final presentation with an unparalleled synergy. Ethan presented the strategic framework with a newfound eloquence, infusing it with emotional insights he had gleaned from his time as Harper. Harper delivered the creative narrative with a powerful blend of passion and surprising strategic clarity, drawing on the logical precision she had learned from Ethan. Their co-authored campaign message was simple, yet resonated deeply with the universal truth they had just experienced. You only understand someone when you've walked a mile in their shoes. The tagline wasn't just catchy, it was authentic, born from their own extraordinary journey. The campaign launched, and it was an immediate, resounding success. The visuals, the copy, the overall message, it struck a chord with the public in a way that Brightwave had rarely seen. It became a viral phenomenon, a cultural touchstone that transcended mere advertising. Ethan and Harper, once the office's most famous rivals, were now celebrated as Brightwave's new power duo, their combined creative and strategic brilliance a force to be reckoned with. Their names were synonymous with innovation, empathy, and groundbreaking advertising. Their relationship, too, had transformed. The sharp edges of their rivalry had been smoothed away, replaced by a comfortable camaraderie, a deep, unspoken respect, and a nascent affection that neither of them fully understood yet. They still bickered sometimes, but now it was playful, tinged with affection, a familiar dance between two people who now knew each other's souls. The great recalibration wasn't just about their bodies, it was about their hearts, their minds, and the profound, unexpected connection that had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. The final chapter of their story was yet to be written, but the groundwork had been laid, not by magic, but by a deeper, truer understanding of what it meant to be human. The success of the Luminique campaign had catapulted Ethan and Harper into a new echelon at Brightwave. Their names were now whispered with admiration, their combined creative genius the talk of the industry. The once intense rivalry that had defined their relationship had completely dissolved, replaced by a dynamic partnership built on mutual respect, deep understanding, and an unspoken bond forged in the crucible of their extraordinary experience. They still had their differences. Ethan remained meticulously organized, Harper beautifully chaotic, but now, these were celebrated quirks rather than sources of friction. Their office became a hub of creative energy, a place where logic and emotion danced in perfect harmony. The "you only understand someone when you've walked a mile in their shoes" campaign continued to dominate the cultural conversation, earning them prestigious industry awards and cementing their reputation as the most innovative duo at Brightwave. Arthur Sterling, the CEO, often observed them with a knowing smile, occasionally remarking, "Whatever happened at that retreat, it was the best investment I ever made." He promoted them both, creating a new co-creative director role for them, a testament to their unparalleled synergy. Their work relationship had transformed seamlessly into a genuine friendship, characterized by playful banter, shared inside jokes about the great recalibration, and a quiet, profound support for each other. They would often grab coffee together, their conversations ranging from project strategies to their newfound appreciation for each other's once-dismissed hobbies. Ethan found himself genuinely interested in Harper's latest art exhibition, and Harper would surprisingly ask Ethan for advice on managing her growing investment portfolio. But underneath the surface of their thriving professional partnership and comfortable friendship, a different kind of emotion had begun to stir. The forced intimacy of the body swap had peeled back all pretenses, revealing the authentic selves beneath. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, their most flawed, and their most brilliant. They had lived each other's struggles, felt each other's joys, and understood each other's deepest fears. This level of knowing transcended superficial attraction. It was a connection of souls. One crisp autumn afternoon, several months after their return from the Catalyst Grove, they found themselves walking through Central Park. The leaves were a riot of gold, crimson, and burnt orange, crunching softly underfoot. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. New York City hummed around them, but in the tranquil expanse of the park, they found a moment of quiet reflection. They had just finished a productive meeting with a new client who had specifically requested the Luminique duo. The meeting had gone flawlessly, their seamless back and forth, their combined vision, leaving the client thoroughly impressed. "Another one for the books, huh?" Harper said, a bright smile on her face as she kicked playfully at a pile of fallen leaves. She was wearing a vibrant scarf, a touch of her usual bohemian flair, but paired with a tailored blazer that subtly hinted at Ethan's influence. Ethan chuckled, a genuine, relaxed sound that was a far cry from his former stiff demeanor. He still wore his impeccably tailored suit, but he had foregone his tie, a small, yet significant, concession to comfort. "Indeed. Though I still think your opening pitch was a touch too poetic for a tech company," he teased, but there was an unmistakable warmth in his voice. "And your strategic breakdown almost put them to sleep, Mr. Cole." "Good thing I added that pop culture reference," Harper shot back, her eyes sparkling. "We balance each other out, I guess." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching a street performer juggle colorful scarves near the Bethesda Terrace. Then, Harper turned to him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You know," she began, her voice thoughtful, "if there were a next time, if we ever got another chance to swap bodies." Ethan stopped, turning to face her, a slight frown creasing his brow. The memory of the body swap was still vivid, a powerful, life-altering experience. "Harper, please. Let's not tempt fate." She laughed, a melodious sound that echoed softly in the autumn air. No, hear me out. If there were a next time, I think I'd want to swap with you again." She looked up at him, her gaze earnest. "Just for a day. To feel that strength again, to see the world through your incredibly logical, organized eyes, without the panic of losing myself. Just to remember what it was like, and how much I learned." Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the genuine curiosity in her eyes, the artistic spirit that had captivated him, the unwavering belief in connection that had ultimately set them both free. He remembered the feeling of living in her body, the rush of emotions, the vibrant creativity, the unexpected vulnerability. He remembered the profound lessons learned, the empathy gained. A soft smile touched his lips, a smile that was genuine, open, and utterly devoid of his old arrogance. He reached out, gently taking her hand, his touch surprisingly tender. The warmth of her hand in his felt natural, right? "No need, Harper," Ethan said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, yet filled with a profound conviction. He tightened his grip on her hand. "No need for another swap." Harper's eyebrows rose slightly, a question in her eyes. "Because this time, Ethan continued, his gaze unwavering, full of a newfound clarity and tenderness. "This time, I want to be with you, in my own body." The words hung in the air, simple, honest, and utterly transformative. Harper's eyes widened, a slow, radiant smile spreading across her face. The implication was clear, undeniable. It wasn't about understanding through a magical exchange of identities anymore. It was about choosing to be together authentically, as themselves. As if on cue, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees above them, dislodging a cascade of golden leaves. They spun and danced around them, creating a momentary, magical whirlwind of color. In that swirl of autumn splendor, amidst the timeless beauty of Central Park, Ethan leaned down and Harper met him halfway. Their kiss was soft, hesitant at first, then deepened, imbued with all the unspoken history of their journey. It wasn't a kiss born of sudden passion, but of a slow, profound understanding, a deep recognition of two souls finally finding their true alignment. It was a kiss that marked not an end, but a beautiful, genuine beginning. A new chapter had dawned for them, not due to a miraculous body swap, but because of the genuine human connection and deep empathy that had blossomed from that impossible experience. They had found love not by becoming each other, but by truly seeing and accepting each other, flaws and all, in their own skins. As the golden leaves drifted around them, painting the New York sky in hues of warmth and hope, Ethan and Harper, two once bitter rivals, now stood united, ready to face the world, not just as brilliant creative partners, but as two hearts that, finally, beat in perfect sync.